Thank you all for your presence tonight, and welcome to the 2019 Old Lyme Board of Selectmen candidates debates. I'm Rich Shriver, President of the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm pleased to represent your hosts this evening. This event is also sponsored by Limeline.com. The purpose of this forum is to aid voters seeking information about candidates for the Board of Selectmen in the upcoming November 5th election. The candidates for First Selectman include the incumbent, Bonnie Reemsnyder, and challenger Tim Girswold. The incumbent Selectman candidates are Mary Jo Nosal and Chris Kerr. Unfortunately, Chris will not be joining us this evening, and I'll have a word about that later. A brief bio submitted by each of the Board of Selectmen candidates is available on tonight's program. Thank you, Bonnie, Tim, Mary Jo, and Chris for seeking election this year, and thank you for your participation in this important event. Our moderator this evening is Beth Hamilton, editor with the Connecticut Mirror and resident of Old Lyme. We are quite pleased to be able to have such an established member of the press, a member of our community, fill this important role. Thank you, Beth. The questions tonight are based on those we received from the community. Olin wanted me to extend a special thanks for the overwhelming number of people who submitted questions for this event and the quality of those questions, which exceeded our expectations. I would like to thank Olin Logan for sponsorship of the event and her insight and counsel throughout the planning process. The audience here tonight is intended to be non-participatory, and we request you refrain from applause, cheers, or other interruptions during the debate. The day is here recording the forum, which will be available after the event via their website and social media. The day's video will also be made available to local public broadcast channels for subsequent rebroadcast. The format tonight follows some traditional guidelines and incorporating an empty seat for Chris Kerr. The order of speaking was determined beforehand, off stage by a coin toss. I can report to you that Tim Girswold won the coin toss, and he deferred the order of speaking, the start of the speaking, to Bonnie and Mary Jo for the opening statements. Candidates are provided an opportunity to make an open statement limited to 90 seconds. There will be a question posed to each of the First Selectman candidates seeking a response to candidacy concerns expressed to us by the community. Following these questions, our moderator will lead the candidates through a series of policy questions where each candidate will have an opportunity to respond to questions with 90 seconds and a rebut. The rebuttal for candidates is 60 seconds of response in the same speaking order of the questions. At the conclusion of the forum, the candidates will have 60 seconds to provide closing statements in reverse speaking order from opening statements. Should there be a need, and it's up to the moderator's discretion to allow further comments from the candidates to help close out the event. I am personally disappointed and frustrated we were not able to secure Chris's involvement with this event. Further, it has been my decision on how best to adjust the format, if at all, with his absence. With inspiration and consideration of public information authored by the League of Women Voters, we're proceeding with what is termed an empty seat format. Other major considerations that we took into account are this race is essentially 4 candidates for 3 seats. Salient decisions that I made include an opening statement supplied by Chris will be read on his behalf. The order of speaking will be along party lines. Time allotted to each candidate is the same for all present. Time for rebuttals for each candidate has been extended. You know, the situation is awkward And no decision, I want to assure you that no decision was taken lightly, even though we have a suboptimal solution. I was inspired walking around the campus of Boston College. I saw a little rock painted, and with the painted on the rock were the words, "Do the right thing at the right time for the right reasons." And I will tell you that I continually, throughout this process, had to think about that in my decision process. Should you have any suggestions for the future and improvements, I welcome your feedback directly to me personally or through general correspondence to the Chamber of Commerce. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to the candidates, and Bonnie and Mary Jo will give their opening statements, followed by Tim Girswold.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to clarify the differences between our administration and my opponent. It has been an honor to serve you for the last 16 years, 8 as first selectman. My focus has been to take care of our basic assets, roads, buildings, and essential services, and provide upgrades in areas as we can afford them and in response to constituent concerns. This has been accomplished through careful assessment and planning, grants, and in collaboration with others. We have succeeded in accomplishing a lot, though my opponent may try to tell a different story. He will say that there are too many projects, but our town has many needs and a CEO must be able to juggle many things. He will say that they take too long, but he knows that there are often unforeseen issues, like in the Academy Lane Fire Dock and the Rogers Lake Dam. Both projects started in his administration and completed in mine, plus careful planning takes time. He will say that Old Lyme should remain the way it is. While no one wants to alter our small town character, change is inevitable, and if we don't take an active role in anticipating it, we lose our ability to influence that change in a positive way. I am proud of our accomplishments, the improvements to Soundview, weed treatment in Rogers Lake, and securing a number of grants, including $600,000 for fiscal stability. Mary Jo and I have proven that we deserve to continue moving Old Lyme forward. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time and interest in attending tonight's Board of Selectmen debate. Tonight you will hear the candidates' responses to the questions you asked, except for the empty chair. You will see where we agree and where we differ as to the important policy concerns affecting our town. The importance of protecting our business and arts district with a vital plan supported by you, the community. The importance of safeguarding what we have and carefully planning for the future. The desire to retain our rural small town character. The need for housing alternatives for taxpayers and the importance we place on sound fiscal management. I've worked diligently for residents since being elected Selectwoman in 2011 and continue to stress community collaboration and communication in all things. I strive to bring new representative voices to town government versus reliance on a few to fill many offices. I show up, I attend meetings, I listen, and support the open discussion of issues and ideas. I enjoy prioritizing projects and evaluating their costs, including the cost of opportunities lost by delaying projects for future administrations to handle. I always show up for Old Lyme, as does my running mate for Selectwoman Bonnie Reemsnyder, and I'm sure you will see that Bonnie and I are the effective, hardworking leadership team Old Lyme needs, and thank you.
Good evening. I have deep roots in Old Lyme, dating back to the 1600s. I became a full-time resident in 1976 following college and service in the U.S. Navy aboard a carrier off of Vietnam. I have 2 daughters who graduated from the Old Lyme schools, and they live here in Old Lyme. I was a member of the Board of Finance for 15 years, 6 years as its chair until 1997, when I was elected first selectman for 14 years until 2011. Since then, I was elected to the town treasurer position and as a member of the Board of Assessment Appeals. Paraphrasing the Farmers Insurance Company ad, I know a thing or two because I've seen a thing or two. Why am I running for first selectman? Well, I am concerned by a number of the current administration's initiatives that are leading the town, I believe, in the wrong direction. I am troubled by my opponent's issues related to the Connecticut Port Authority. I want to preserve our unique rural community. If elected, I will not put my personal interests above those of the town, and I assure you I have no other political aspirations. On November 5th, we can do better. Please elect me and the rest of the Republican team.
And now I'm going to read a statement from Chris that was provided to me. First, I'd like to thank the Old Lyme Chamber of Commerce, Rich Schreiber, Old Logan, and moderator Beth Hamilton for putting together this forum. This municipal election season has given me reason to reflect on my experience the past 2 years as a selectman and to think about what I believe are our town priorities based on the conversations with many residents. We have spent a lot of time over the last 2 years discussing many big, important, and impacting initiatives. Large potential plans for Halls Road privately owned businesses, multifamily development at I-95 and Route 156, sewers at Soundview, and merging our police with East Lyme, among other issues. We have stretched the town too thin with initiatives being driven by unselected appointed ad hoc committees, and as a result, many large decisions seem rushed on the voters. I want to make clear what I support as achievable near-term goals. I strongly support Halls Road improvements that can get done quickly and well. Sidewalks, crosswalks for safety, beautification, traffic islands, and a disciplined approach to signage. The town should support worthy on Halls Road projects through accommodating zoning like decreased setbacks. I do not believe the town government should act as a master developer of land they do not own. I believe the town needs to support good development, but not impose designs driven by people with no ownership. And I can't finish it.
Good evening. The first two questions are directed to Bonnie and Tim. The first one will go to Bonnie. These are multi-part questions, so please try to address all the issues raised, although I realize you are going to be challenged by time. Bonnie, why should people vote for you in light of the controversy surrounding your time as chair of the Port Authority and your longer stint as chairman of the authority's Finance Committee? To be more specific, why did you not recognize the impropriety, or at least the appearance of impropriety, of having the CPA purchase your daughter's artwork? Also, state audits showed the Port Authority had serious fiscal management problems during the time you chaired the Finance Committee. How can voters have confidence that the problems and misconduct that occurred at the CPA will not replay in Old Lyme?
Thank you. I'll do my best to answer the questions, but 60 seconds is not a lot of time, or 90 seconds. The initial article by David Collins implied that as chairman of the Port Authority, I oversaw the sale of engineered sound panels with custom photography by my daughter. In fact, this happened over 2 years ago before I was chairman. I've always been thoroughly familiar with conflict of interest rules, which require a board member to refrain from participating in such a transaction, but do not require an organization to abandon the transaction because it may benefit the organization's best interest. I played no role in initiating the transaction, and as soon as I heard it was being considered, I informed the executive director and my daughter that I could play no role in it. Ultimately, it was approved, not by me, but by the chairman at the time, as documented in subsequent articles. I clearly did nothing wrong, but did not appreciate at the time that the appearance might raise questions from the public. I am very proud of the work that I did with the Port Authority in regards to being finance chair. I would dispute some of the statements about the audits. I have spoken to the Port Authority members just as recently as Friday morning, And the audits they are conducting now are looking very good. So I'll wait for those audits to come out. Thank you.
Thank you. This next question is for Tim. Tim, why should people vote for you in light of the fact you weren't nominated by your party in time to be its endorsed candidate? You had to petition to be on the ballot and only did so after Ms. Reemsnyder's problems surfaced at the Port Authority. How can voters have confidence that you really want this job?
During our caucus, I was hopeful that there would be someone who would come forward and be the first selectman. I had done it for 14 years, and I thought that that time served was well done, but I had obviously stepped back. When the Connecticut Port Authority information came forward, why I was motivated to not let an incumbent have a free ticket to be elected. I therefore talked it over with some associates and decided that I would petition to get on the ballot. I circulated petitions, and I was successful at getting more than double the amount of signatures required, and I was very gratified that so many people thought I was worthy. I have done this job. I think I can do it well, and I intend to do it well. And I think that some of these reasons that I specify are compelling, and I could not, in good faith, let the position go unchallenged.
Thank you. This next question is for everyone, and we will start with either Bonnie or Mary Jo. Your choice, ladies. This has to do with conservation and sewers. Where do you see Old Lyme heading over the next 5 to 10 years in terms of sewer expansion to fight groundwater pollution? Do you support sewers anywhere in Old Lyme beyond the beach communities, for example, at Rogers Lake? And how should the town handle those property owners who cannot afford to pay for the sewer project?
Thank you for the question. When we were first elected in 2011, it became apparent that the private beach associations had already completed their, or were very close to completing their studies for sewers south of 156. And in fact, I attended a sewer information meeting soon after election when I realized I knew nothing about this initiative, and was approached by the head of the DEP at the time and said, "We're coming for you." Well, I guess why not? When we have 3 streets amongst private beach associations surrounding them being sewered, why wouldn't they look at us too? So we got on board and got a study going that ultimately, as many of you know, was turned down, really not supported by the DEP. And we took the next best affordable option, which was to sewer New London. I support the initiatives. We are under order. I support completing the order. We are not sewering Rogers Lake or anywhere else in town that has not ever been discussed, not ever at any board meeting, not any WPCA meeting, and never in my presence.
Do I go next?
Yes.
Thank you. I have to keep track of the order here. I do support sewers in the beach areas based on the study that we did and the apparent need down there. But I am troubled by the article that I recently read in the RTC news organization. I was never called about the allegation made by another first selectman from another town that I'm interested in sewering a lot of places in Old Lyme. That statement was never made. I was so surprised by it that I called the first selectman and said, "What is this about?" And he said, "Well, we were talking in general, and you know, it's still mysterious to me how he seemed so familiar with the thoughts in my mind." But he did issue a statement that he submitted to the Connecticut Examiner, and that was not posted, where he tried to articulate that that wasn't an actual conversation that we had. We need to focus on the beaches. Anything with Rogers Lake is premature because we don't have a study done. We aren't seeing indications from the water quality testing that were done, and it's never been discussed, although people will ask about Rogers Lake and assume. But I'll also point out that the first selectman from the other town also thought that this was a $50 to $100 million project, when in fact it's under $10 million. And I am concerned about the impact on the residents in the area, and the WPCA is working very hard to bring it in way under cost.
Tim?
Most residential properties and buildings in town have compliant wastewater systems that operate properly. The town's pump-out ordinance has worked well, and our residents are complying. Point of Woods installed sewers several years ago, and in 2015, the DEP issued the town an administrative order which directed the 3 beaches in Sound View to plan for sewers. I guess one might conclude that if you go ask the DEP for help, they will certainly give it to you. So the project is being designed. The pump station, which was supposed to be on town property, has taken an excessive amount of time and will now be located on a private piece of property. Clearly, in 5 years, we will see how it pans out, but I think the residents of Sound View will be expected to pay very steep fees in some cases. I have concerns about how these sewers will make properties less affordable, and especially in Rogers Lake and perhaps along Halls Road if that project moves forward. So I think we need to be very diligent and be careful how we engage the DEP in the future.
Would either of you like to rebut?
Thank you. Again, Tim, as I mentioned previously, the DEP was already looking at us. We needed to get on board to find out what our options were. We ran a study that would have kept our wastewater in town, as you well know, but that was not supported by the DEP. As far as impact on residents, the WPCA is doing an excellent job of refining the EDU units to make this as affordable as possible for the users who will benefit for the project. The costs spent by the town to date are about $500,000, so we have supported this project and will continue to do that under our budgeting process. And again, sewering elsewhere is not on the table.
And I would also like to add, at one of the WPCA meetings, a resident asked the Board of Selectmen to consider funding a portion of this by the town. Because that request was made, I did bring data to the Board of Selectmen to consider this. If the town were funding $1 million of it, out of what we would end up with budgeting would be $7.4 million that we would bond. It would cost us about $60,000 a year. In bringing it to the Board of Selectmen, and I agree with them on this, from the beginning we were talking about those that benefit from this sewer project would be paying for the use of it. And to change that on the voters right before referendum or after the referendum would really be unfair. But we did discuss it and consider it.
Would you like to rebut?
Well, I would disagree that the EDU calculation is fair and reasonable. Certainly the Water Pollution Control Authority has the responsibility to figure out how to pay for it. But there are individuals who have compliant septic systems that would be paying probably $80,000 and have to abandon their $30,000 septic system. I realize it's not going to be easy to apportion the costs, but I think we have to be sensitive. What we do with this Soundview project will also be a precedent for any future sewer projects that may be considered. So I think we need to be very careful here, and hopefully this will get resolved in a satisfactory way.
Thank you. This next question goes to you first, Tim. It's about Halls Road and economic development along Halls Road. Some progress has been made regarding a vision for a more vibrant, walkable Halls Road. What are your thoughts on the future of economic development in that area and by extension the town? And Tim, you've said you oppose using outside consultants in this endeavor. Can you elaborate?
First, Halls Road is a state road. It's Route 1. And the abutting properties are private property. Any plan must be consulted with the DEP, and the property owners must agree to participate in some fashion. The committee has been working for 5 years on this, and so what do we have at this point? We have the Yale School of Design plan, which is grandiose, and I believe it is unachievable and unaffordable. I don't believe the rents would be sufficient to amortize the capital improvements, such as taking the buildings on the marketplace down, except for the big Y, and moving them up along Route 1. I can't imagine that that would make economic sense to those owners. I think we should start with what is achievable and what is generally agreed upon. There's been talk about a sidewalk from the Lyme Art Association up to the Essex Savings Bank. Maybe we would rebuild the Bow Bridge over the Lieutenant River. This is achievable. It would be somewhat expensive, but not nearly as expensive as these other plans. We could have a couple of crosswalks, some good landscaping around the perimeter, and possibly some roadway planters. We must focus our attention on upgrading commercial properties in Ron 56 down in the beach area as well.
Thank you. Bonnie?
Thank you. Let's be very clear. When we're talking about a master plan, we're talking about the right-of-way. We are not talking about imposing new buildings on the private property owners, but we are talking about how the right-of-way improvements will impact those private property owners, and we want to talk about what kind of flexibility they will need if 10 or 15 or 20 years from now they decide to invest in their property and make improvements, such as the gas station down on Route 156. There are times that property owners see fit to take down buildings, rebuild, and have a whole new layout. In that case, we did have a master plan. When they came for their permit, we asked for them to put in a sidewalk, and they did, according to our master plan. That's what we're trying to do on Halls Road. Once we have consensus for the community, we can move forward with those sidewalks. Even if we do little parts at a time, we will be doing it to a master plan, instead of just having a short blacktop from Lime Street to the river, because that's the only thing we want to do, bits and pieces. That wasn't part of the master plan. That was just a quick fix to address a concern.
Thank you for the question. I'm very, very excited about this opportunity looking at Halls Road, and it does have applications for other parts of our town. The way we won grants for Soundview will certainly be look at ways we win grants for this initiative, should we get to that point. This is not a project that's going to happen in 5 years, 10 years. It may take 20 years. It took Old Saybrook at least that to get their TIF district passed this year. We recognize that, but this has been an exciting opportunity. So much community outreach. The presentations have been positively received, but there is no master plan yet. It's in development. There is no plan yet, Tim. We're trying to get feedback from the community. We're attending meetings. We're going outside to other communities to see how they worked their downtown areas, which are also on state roads. This is not just an Old Lyme initiative. This is a state initiative. This will bring vital dollars to our town. It will also have some, hopefully, some residential aspects for those of us who, our kids have moved out. We might want a smaller place, but we want to live in Old Lyme, and we want to have active transport opportunities. By that I mean walking and biking, which is a $78 billion industry. Why shouldn't we have a piece of that? Thank you.
Tim, would you like to rebut?
The Yale School plan cost us over $40,000, and what we have seen are some pictures of these large buildings along the edge of the road and around Davis Road. And so I think there is definitely a move to have these large improvements. There is even a road proposed to go in where the post office is, go behind the shops, and then wind up in the commuter lot so that cars could go up on the interstate. So there'd be a thoroughfare going through the Old Lyme Stores property that would be used fairly significantly. The master plan, I think, is something we all have to look at, and it's being billed as what we want to do. I don't know whether the businesses have had one-to-one sessions and whether they've expressed agreement or not, but they darn well better have.
Go ahead.
So first of all, a few corrections. We've only spent about $13,000 on Yale Urban Design. We do have to coordinate with the DOT, and they encourage that. And unfortunately, sometimes in this community, to have a conversation about ideas, people back away and get accusatory. Yes, we have talked about a bypass road. Yes, we have talked about buildings being built closer to a sidewalk. But those are all conversations that help us to develop a master plan. And I really applaud the Economic Development Commission, which has really stepped up to the plate, working with CERC, doing studies, doing the survey that many of you, I'm sure, have filled out and helped us to determine what it is that this community wants. When we are clear on that, then it is worth spending the money on a final master plan and implementing it.
I think I'm just going to add that this initiative involves many constituencies in town. The businesses on Halls Road absolutely are our customer. The public in Old Lyme is absolutely our customer. And the need to address downsizing, as I mentioned earlier, is absolutely imperative. I think that this model of outreach to the communities and to our constituencies are also things that we will use as we do other town improvements, which many people have asked us to address. Thank you.
Thank you. This next question is on police services. We'll start with Bonnie and Mary Jo. Where do you stand on regionalizing the Old Lyme police force with East Lyme? Were there any final recommendations made to the Selectmen from the Police Services Option Committee, and if so, what were they?
Thank you. The question about merging with East Lyme was started as one of those items that I feel is a healthy conversation in a community. We get a lot of pressure from the state to regionalize and look for opportunities to regionalize. And unfortunately, the suggestion that we have a conversation sometimes is met with obstruction and accusations that the decisions have already been made. We did have a committee that was looking at this. I would say that the consensus was on the committee that we weren't ready for the merger. But I have to tell you, having the committee meet as often as it did was an opportunity for us to really look at our police services and the model that we have right now with the resident trooper program. In the end, no model is going to be perfect, but we should be able to have meetings and talk about what model really is good for us. And oftentimes when we had the meetings, it was awkward because there were people that were angry that were even thinking about a merger. At the same time, I can tell you that with a resident trooper program, we don't have local control. I was present at the interviews, but anything I had to say, any scores I made, were not considered in the decision-making as to the resident trooper that was assigned.
I actually support the opportunity to look at our police services, because that is our responsibility as elected officials, the safety of our community. We had some tough summers, and a lot of this grew out of feedback from the community. This past summer, after some planning, we had additional planned support on the summers down at Soundview. Things appear to have gone very well. But that doesn't mean we don't abandon the opportunity to meet with people, to see what other communities are doing that have merged or have some kind of intermunicipal agreement with a neighboring town, to see if that might best serve us in the future. Again, it's conversations, it's bringing people together, it's sharing information, and out of this, I think a creative opportunity exists. Thank you.
Tim?
We have been a resident state trooper town for decades. And while there are some bumps in the roads, it has been a very good arrangement. The state police have amazing resources at their disposal, which a police department in a town would not have. That being said, when we consider merging with East Lyme, which is 3 times our size, our 6 officers would be melded into a force of 20-some-odd officers, and we would rarely see them. Our officers, I've hired probably 2/3 of the officers that are on force today. They are long, good employees. They know our town, they know our kids, they know where the trouble spots are. The new building which has been bought over there would be extremely expensive, so I think that's very scary, and their police department's only a couple of years old. I'm glad to hear that it's not something on the front burner. But were we to merge with a bigger town, we would have to be very worried about control. We would be the tail on the dog. We would not be controlling things. So I think that we need to back away from this arrangement and keep our local police control, our policemen under our own wing.
Would you like to rebut?
Yeah, I would just like to add that, first of all, I think it was important that we have the discussion and talk about our police services. It gave us an opportunity to really understand what they are and how it really works for our community. And in the end, my recommendation was to continue meeting with the committee on a quarterly basis just to review our police services, see how we can improve, see if we needed to initiate some new things. Do we want 24-hour coverage rather than 16-hour coverage? Do we need more officers? You know, there was one night I went to call an officer and found that nobody was on duty. Where the local control is with that, I can't tell you, but I wasn't informed, which I feel I should have been, and I had to deal with the state police. So I think having quarterly meetings with some sort of a police committee would benefit the entire community.
Our officers in Old Lyme are very good people. I don't think that has ever been a question. And many of them have worked for us for a long time. So I applaud their support, and I look forward to working with them in the future. But this is resident state trooper program is very expensive. It's over $200,000 to our town. That's worth looking at the costs and evaluating if there's other options eventually. So to not have that conversation, I think, would not be responsible of ourselves. And I hope that we can continue to meet with the committee, because I think the people on the committee are very well-spoken, representative of different parts of the community, and they gave a very good feedback to Bonnie, and I think that's important.
Jim?
I wanted to observe that when I was first selectman, I would meet with the lieutenant and the master sergeant in Westbrook, and I found them to be very agreeable to discuss issues, particularly if we were not happy. I was told that if a particular resident trooper was giving us trouble and it was really a disagreeable situation, they would reassign that trooper. And when we hired constables, police officers, they would organize the interviews and so forth, and I found them to be very receptive to my input. I don't know why my opponent has felt excluded or minimized. I thought it was a good experience. So I think we can work with them, and I think we can do better in that regard.
Thank you. This next question goes to Tim first, I believe. Is that right? It's on affordable housing. According to the state, only 81 of Old Lyme's 5,021 housing units, which is 1.6%, are deemed affordable. Yet the 37-unit affordable housing project proposed for Neck Road near I-95 was withdrawn by the nonprofit developer, even though it was approved by the Zoning Commission, because of opposition from residents. The developer has asked that town officials work with them to find an alternative location. If elected, will you do so? What is your plan for bringing in more affordable housing for families and seniors? And what is the risk the town will face if it cannot increase its percentage of affordable housing stock to meet the state's 10% standard?
I think we need to be clear that this 10% figure that you hear about, and some characterize it as a mandate. It is not a mandate. It is a goal. It is guidance. So I think we need to get that understood. That being said, I think we do have a very limited amount of affordable housing. So I think that the plan which came to us was concocted way before it was made public, and by the time it went to zoning, it became a real brouhaha, and it made our town very divided, and it really made the issue unpleasant. So I think what we should look at the 2010 Plan of Conservation and Development. That recommended that the Board of Selectmen form a committee. 9 years later, it looks like we are going to form a committee. We should have on that committee a variety of people with different points of view, and we ought to get consensus so that our community heals this dreadful divide. We can do better with that, and I'm sure with looking at other things such as assisted living and apartments, what they're called in-law apartments and so forth. I think we have seniors as well as young people to think about.
I, without a doubt, support looking for affordable housing opportunities in Old Lyme. I also support Hope Partnerships. I think they're an honorable organization, and both my husband and I personally donated to them over the course of our time here in Old Lyme. As an official, when you have a zoning commission process, it would have been inappropriate to come out and publicly share my thoughts on this. Instead, I believe it's really important for an official to listen, to be objective, and to hear all sides. So I did listen to the applicant, and I understood their positions. And I did listen a lot to town residents. I attended all the hearings, and it was very clear that the community was not in support of that project, but is in support of affordable housing. And the committee that is being planned by the Board of Selectmen should be balanced and should be bring some great recommendations to the town. And in fact, I hope some legislation comes out of this to indicate that the 10%, which is a statutory requirement, is addressed. And perhaps our Devin Carney, who I asked to be on this committee and he has not, will be able to bring some of this legislation to Hartford on our behalf.
I also support affordable housing in the community. I served on the Old Lyme Affordable Housing Committee that was absorbed by HOPE, and I know that HOPE is a good organization. In regards to the 10%, it is actually on the books, and depending on the administration, we could suffer consequences if we're not actively striving to meet that. But I also think forming a committee is the right approach to use. And of course, like all other committees, we try to have a balance of people's interest on that committee because it really is the only fair way to have a conversation. So the Board of Selectmen has come up with a charge. We have accepted applications, and I can assure you they are a diverse group of people, and the Board of Selectmen has been given all of those applications to look at. And we hope that we can do something that will help heal the community, that will look for the impacts of the state statute, opportunities in Old Lyme where affordable housing would be appropriate, and support from the entire community to do this. But I am concerned that this community isn't affordable for everyone, and I think that this is a real opportunity for all of us.
Tim?
I think that what Old Lyme lacks, in addition to the number of affordable housings, it would be a life care and independent living facility, something similar to Essex Meadows, something similar to Chester Village West. So many of our seniors who get to the point where they feel they can't work on their own need to go to one of these places, and we don't have one. These people are wonderful. They leave our town with all their knowledge, and we can't retain them. So I think we ought to open up conversations to see if there might be opportunities in town for such a place. And once this committee is going, we could explore parcels of land where affordable might be done. I think we don't necessarily want to have a great big building just for affordable. I think that the nature of our town is small and rural, so we should look to that.
I think that these initiatives we're looking at along Halls Road and other parts of our community will be really important parts of this conversation. The committee will have a big charge ahead of them to look at opportunities where some affordable housing, which we clearly need, is possible. And I know that many of you that were in those hearings stood up to say, we need affordable housing, we support affordable housing. And I think you'll come to these meetings and show us that. Right now we have 30 units at Wrightfield Manor. We have 24 units at Limewood. We have 3 homes that built by Old Lyme Affordable Housing. We have a potential for 2 building blocks in this recent purchase of open space. So about 1.6% of our housing is affordable. We have a long ways to go. And I think working together, we can find some opportunities.
And I would add that I agree with Tim that we should be looking at assisted living. That takes planning, which is what I've suggested. I'm very proud to say that the Economic Development Commission has done a survey asking questions about those kinds of things, looking for opportunities on 156 and other areas of town for development, and marketing Old Lyme to just the right businesses to maintain our character. So we are stepping in that direction, and I'm very pleased that our commission is taking an active role in that.
Thank you. This next question is about Soundview. Soundview is seen as an area of town with great potential. There are some who have expressed concern about the aesthetics of Soundview and the ongoing viability of businesses there. If elected, how would you handle this issue, and what role do you see for the town in addressing property rights and public safety concerns in that area? Bonnie, we'll start with you and Mary Jo.
So I've always believed that Soundview has great potential, and that's why we looked for grants to do some work there. We have done Soundview improvements, which put in new sidewalks, new parking, and even repaved the entire road. It was a $700,000 project that we only funded $140,000. It did come under budget, and we're very pleased with the results. In addition, we recently got a grant for $400,000 to continue those sidewalks up to Route 156 and along the north side of 156. We'll have a nice crosswalk there, have some safety implementation so that the pedestrians that are already there will be able to traverse safely to the beaches and to the businesses. I know that the businesses struggle there. It's not simply because of the aesthetics. It is also because of the nature of the area. They have about 3 or 4 months to do all of their business for a full year, and they do struggle with that. When some bought the old buildings and came to town hall to talk about what the town would like to see, and I talked about businesses there, they said it's not viable, we're going to put residential homes. And my response was, I can't compel them to open businesses. It is their property. They need to do what they see as right.
It's been an absolute joy to be working on projects in Soundview. I've worked with some of the nicest people I've ever met who are so committed to that area of town. And it is our beach. And I have just had one of the best experience of my life working down there on this improved streetscape and seeing the happiness in people and seeing them use the sidewalks and seeing them use the businesses that have survived. I'd like to think that the EDC process that we're going through will be very valuable in working with the businesses in Soundview too. But I do feel this is an example where we were fiscally not present in Soundview for years, and now we are. For a little bit of money and a little bit of investment, we are turning the corner on that part of basically our southern Main Street. It's very exciting, and it is going to bring in tourism dollars, and again, we need to get a piece of that active transportation budget. The bike path is going to be key. Eventually, the DOT has our plan. Eventually, the bike path on 156 is going to be really connect across the whole state, and that's going to be awesome. The 9-Town Transit will be able to drop off safely at a bus stop, and we'll have kind of we hope to have a transportation hub where people can drop off, get picked up, put their bikes on, get off there, and I think businesses will improve. Thank you.
Tim?
Many of us know Soundview has had a very interesting history. During World War II, the U.S. Navy was not allowed to come to Soundview because it was so raunchy. That's unusual. There was a Hotel Brandmore and other points of interest, but that was then and now is now. I think that the key to Soundview is to lessen the dependence on seasonal businesses and seasonal residents. It's very difficult for people to make a living with just 3 or 4 months of operation. So if we could have more residential that was a full-time, people living along Hartford Avenue, many of the other houses on the other 2 streets are year-round. But if we could encourage more year-round, then perhaps other things would happen. and there'd be activity there. So I think that we have some good initiatives going. The arcade has been torn down. Kokomo's is up and running. They want to run longer into the season. I remember Skip Sibley got going the Soundview Design District, so if we could work on that and make it easier for developers to improve that area, I think it would be a great investment, and I agree. The beach is the best of all around, so that would be a plus as well.
Bonnie? No rebuttal? Mary Jo?
Yeah, I'll just add that, I was kind of surprised to hear Tim talk about full-time residential in Hartford Avenue, and I applaud you for that. That's awesome, because many of you remember his opposition to changing seasonal in our zoning regulations not too long ago. That was very destructive to our community. But I want to add that, again, this is really, really an important initiative that is paid off by applying for grants. Bonnie's administration promised grants, applied for grants, received the grants, and utilized the grants, unlike some other projects under Tim's administration where grants were promised and not applied for, and we're still paying off that.
Let's see. Okay, this next question has to do with blight. Many residents of Old Lyme believe there are too many abandoned or neglected properties in town. Do you agree this is a problem, and if so, what are your plans to address it? Tim, you go first.
There was a blight ordinance drafted, and I think it's in a drawer somewhere, but the difficulty with a blight ordinance is in the crafting of the detail. If one gets down to how tall the grass is, or what color, or whether the paint is flaking too much, that can be a nightmare probably for the people who need to enforce it. I think we all know of properties, not only in the beach area, but around town, where the properties are not good representatives of our town. We do have health and building codes, and so I think before we embrace a blight ordinance, we might try to more vigorously enforce those situations through our existing ordinances and rules. The problem is in the eye of the beholder, and I agree there are some bad situations, and if we could talk with, say, the people who own Cherry Stones, the old Cherry Stones and other places, and say, what can we do to entice you to do better? Maybe we can avoid a blight ordinance, which would be a whole nother level of bureaucracy.
So we did put together a blight ordinance because a lot of people feel that the blight ordinance is the answer to everything. We had a public presentation. There were concerns about the wording in the blight ordinance, even though it was talked about and people wanted these things. It wasn't just about the height of the grass. We were not trying to impose things on people that they couldn't paint their houses a certain color. So it had to go back for legal review in a year that we had enough legal bills. So it is waiting for review. But I have to say, the most effective approach to dealing with blight is when we do it collaboratively. The officials in town do have, they have a jurisdiction, they have some authority to impose some rules. But most often when we're dealing with blight, we're dealing with other issues. It's a very complex issue. We're dealing with poverty, we're dealing with mental issues, and if we go in there as a team, which is how we handle it, find out what resources we can provide for people who are struggling and try to help them through what they're going through. That is most often how we are effective. If we just go in because we have an ordinance and impose fines, It doesn't work. They will just rack up the fines and rack up the fines, and in the end, they just have a big bill that they can't even pay.
I actually supported the blight ordinance, and I was really proud of our town officials who, this is their responsibility. They worked together to draft the blight ordinance. When it was presented to the community, it was clear that there were more people against the ordinance as it was written than supported it. So as on many initiatives, you bring it out to the community, you get feedback, you might have to bring it back, let people think about it, and it can be addressed again. That particular blight ordinance was directed towards residential and business blight. Maybe there's another approach. Maybe we look at just business blight or separated. I've heard that recommendation too. But we're not done having this discussion. I think it's really important because in addition to remedying what is perceived as blight, it's to avoid blight in the future. Thank you.
Tim?
I think before we take the next step, maybe we need to ask our enforcement people in the land use area to see if they can do a little better job. We have Ledge Light now, so perhaps they have more resources than we had when we were doing it alone. But clearly something needs to be done, and I hope that we can get on top of some of these egregious situations.
Would you like to rebut?
And I would say that we are dealing with them one at a time. There have been solutions in particular cases, which I'm not going to get into, but in one case, a building was taken down. In another, people were relocated, and that was all with the help of the town. We bring in our zoning, we bring in our fire marshal, we bring in our building official, our health official, and we include social services, because very often that's where the resources are going to come from to help people that are dealing with, and it's not just about blight, it's about struggles in life. And so I believe that this compassionate approach is the best way to approach it for success.
Okay, this next question goes to Bonnie or Mary Jo first. So, as you are probably aware, the state is facing a $2.5 billion budget deficit in the next 2-year budget cycle, which could result in reduced ECS grants and other forms of municipal aid, particularly if forecasts of a recession are correct. Even the stalemate currently occurring in the legislature over tolls has begun to impact local governments, as the state has failed to release bonding money that pays for road repairs and winter plowing. This puts a burden on towns, as you know, yet local officials have resisted calls for regional services all over Connecticut, especially as it relates to schools. Given all of those factors, how do you intend to maintain services, including our schools, and improve the quality of life for our residents if economic conditions worsen?
Thank you very much. I'm just sure that 90 seconds isn't going to be enough time. I have to say that we're all aware of the impact of the state woes that we're facing. The good news is that we don't rely heavily on state aid. The bad news is we don't get much state aid. In the past, we've actually budgeted zero revenue from the state in a year that we were unsure what they were going to give us, if they were going to come through with what they promised us. So our community really is in a good position to be able to weather this unless we get the teacher's retirement imposed on us. That is really going to impact us negatively. And there are other things that are being talked about that would impact us negatively. In regards to solving this through regionalization, I have to say that regionalization does not always equate to saving money. We belong to a council of governments of 17 towns, and it is a conversation that we have often. how can we share services that will help us to provide better service and hopefully save money. It is a challenge. There are things that are in the way, such as union contracts. Having a conversation very often makes people freak out. You're going to do what? So it is a challenge. I think, again, we're in a good position because we don't rely heavily on state aid at this point.
One thing I have admired about Bonnie's administration on working with the Board of Finance is how carefully we budget and how well we plan. The state has been in trouble for a long time. Nevertheless, we have moved forward by continuing our fiscal strategy, which is to be prudent, to look for grants. I mean, that is significantly how a small town can make improvements in a tight budget arena. I mean, that's what we've been in since we were elected, so I don't anticipate that changing. We have a healthy surplus, which is wonderful, because if we do get into a bind, we do have monies that will pay off our debt, which is limited. We have town hall that we're still paying on, and we have a library loan. So we can support our debt, which is a comfort. As a result, the town of Old Lyme is ranked number 5th in the state for fiscal stability, according to Yankee Institute for Public Policy. That should give us a lot of comfort. In the meantime, we need to look on the revenue side of town and how we can utilize our assets, which include our recreational, beautiful recreational sites in town, and see how we can advance getting tourism dollars, I believe. In addition, we need to continue to watch our taxes very closely and keep our stable mill rate.
Tim?
Isn't it amazing that every year we talk about the state of Connecticut financial problems, $2.5 billion. It's amazing that the mindset is not to address the problems, the unfunded pension obligations, the post-retirement things. These are huge, huge amounts of money that we're never going to dig out, and the taillights leaving Connecticut are blinding. So I think we need to get new people in the state government. We are members of the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities and the Council of Small Towns. When these ridiculous proposals to make us shoulder $1 million a year for the teacher pension, or if we don't have enough kids in our school, we have to raft up with another school. These are decisions that we should be making. And I think we can get these lobbying organizations, which have 159 towns in the case of CCM, and really make noise up at the Capitol, because we can shift the deck chairs on the Titanic here, but we really need some fundamental changes in our state government, and it's just a pathetic situation that the towns and cities have to suffer like this.
Bonnie?
I would agree that shouldering that the teacher's retirement is going to be difficult for our town. And when these kinds of ideas come up, I have been a vocal person, both with cost and CCM, against that, as I think many of the towns have been. And in regards to regionalization, I have spoken out against the Department of Public Health when they wanted to make larger health districts, and said, really, the towns need to be the ones that weigh in on any regionalization that we do. A lot of that does go on anyway. We as town CEOs work together on things really behind the scenes that people may not even realize. We're also always supportive of one another, and work to save money together. So I have repeatedly said to the state, let the towns figure out whose sandbox we're playing in together, and we will get it right. I
think small towns have to be creative. If we're going to regionalize, It doesn't mean we have to regionalize police force, something that large, but maybe we can regionalize services that we need and depend on. For example, we're looking for a ZEO. That might be something that really makes smart fiscal sense. A human resources department, maybe a tax collector. But we can be creative in a small town and work with our neighbors like Lyme and our school district. And under Bonnie, we've been very, very positive relationships with these municipalities. And we can, again, look at some of the initiatives. We're looking at Halls Road and Soundview improvements to bring in added revenue to our coffers.
Tim?
The town of Old Lyme and surrounding towns have a lot of good regional effort going already. Regional school is obviously the biggest one for us. Council of Governments, Ledge Light Health District, a probate court in East Lyme, the 911 call center, 9-town transit district, household hazardous waste. So we do a bunch of things and we'll do more, and that's great. I think, though, that getting back to the fundamental problem of the state deficit, unless something happens there, it's just not going to get corrected. That is the gorilla. You know, we can do these things which are worthwhile, but when the shoe drops, when these pensions need to be dealt with, it's going to be very, very difficult. So we have to keep our eye on that ball.
Thank you. This next question goes to Tim first. It is on the topic of shoreline zoning. What is your position on the Zoning Commission's proposed ordinance requiring a 100-foot setback from the shoreline, which would double the current 50-foot minimum setback requirement for coastal and riverfront properties?
I have not seen the actual proposal, but as I understand it, it increases the distance from 50 to 100 feet. And I believe the Zoning Commission indicated that properties that would fall within that extra 50 feet would not be bothered. But I guess if somebody was in a house that was now included in the 100 feet and they wanted to make an addition, they would have to comply. And certainly if a house were damaged with a fire or hurricane damage or something, I'm not sure how that would be handled for what would then be a non-conforming house. I respect the fact that we have rising water and perhaps these flood zones have been increased in certain areas, and therefore there's a sensitivity to give a little more leeway to these wetlands. We know that people who have lawns up against Rogers Lake or tidal wetlands and they fertilize, all that runoff goes into the wetlands and it creates serious problems for the wetlands. So I understand the motivation to protect the wetlands. I know it's a work in progress, so we'll stay tuned and see what happens.
I attended both the Zoning Commission meetings where this initiative was brought up. So right now, I would say right now I'm in the learning, listening, researching mode, which is what we typically do at this stage. I applaud the Zoning Commission for stating that these hearings will go on as long as it can possibly, as long as they need to, till we come to a resolution. And they are opening up the conversation to this issue, which of course is related to climate change. Data will be needed to support whether one size fits all, whether you're along Long Island Sound or whether you're along the Lieutenant River. But I think through this process, at least we're beginning the conversation. And it'll be important to have a consistent and streamlined approach that which they shared at the last zoning mission meeting. And as Tim said, this discussion is just beginning. There's lots of room for feedback, and people should come. People should voice their opinion. It's a democratic process. Thank you.
Today there was an article in The Day written by Mary Beekert, And I think if you read the article, you understand what the Zoning Commission is trying to accomplish. I also attended the last meeting because clearly this was causing stress for some people, and I understand why. Anytime you're talking about increasing setbacks, that's definitely a hardship. But we're actually talking about it being applicable to new construction. The chair and the vice chair made it clear that this was to start the conversation. And make no mistake, the federal government is urging communities that live on shore with, in our case, 2 shore sides, to have the discussion about the impact of rising sea levels, because that's going to impact our grand list, and it's going to put people in harm's way. So I applaud the Zoning Commission for having a conversation, and I also applaud them for their response to people who expressed very vocal concerns about this, that they said, let us know what you're thinking. Keep coming back, talk to us about this, and let's see if we can come to some conclusion. So I applaud the people who went, and I say concerned citizens should attend, listen, and express their views and get involved.
Tim?
I read in the paper that the Planning Commission and the ZBA are also in this triangle of land use boards that need to work on this. I'm sure that there will be future meetings with those, I'll get those people together to talk this over. We don't want to have it where planning is unhappy with what zoning does, or ZBA doesn't like what planning's doing. So hopefully we can get our land use people together, they can work it out, and then keep a discussion going with the residents. We are obviously facing serious considerations with the rising water situation, so I think we need to work on it, but not to make it so onerous that landowners lose property rights.
Would you like to rebut?
I think I'll just, thank you. I just want to reiterate that this is part of zoning's job, to look at not only what we have here, but what we may have in the future. And if everyone is aware, with inundation, we will lose a significant amount of our grand list in the future. So this is very, very important that we begin the discussion on this. Thank you.
And I would just like to add that there were members from the Planning Commission at the last meeting. There were members from Zoning Board of Appeals at the last meeting, and they did speak out. I'm happy to report that in conjunction with the Economic Development Commission, we sponsored a municipal training in the spring, which brought all of our boards and commissions together to talk about how they can collaborate and communicate, so there's better interaction between our boards and commissions, which I think is really essential when we're talking about such an important issue.
Thank you. That was the final question. I think we're ready for your closing statements.
We all live here because we value our town's small town character and our sense of community. Many people before us have resisted the types of development that would change that. As stewards of our towns, we must respect the past and plan for the future. We should take care to promote development that maintains the scale and the appearance of a small town. Think about how our neighboring towns have chosen a different path. I pledge to you that I will try to be a good steward for our town. I will fight against attempts by the state to mandate mediocrity and harmful budget cuts. I will promote necessary projects and work hard to have them completed on time and on budget. I will be transparent, and I will listen to the opinions of all constituents. We are a generous community, and we care about each other. So let us rise to the challenge and ensure that our town continues to be the place in which we say we are proud to live.
We are so blessed to live in Old Lyme. The community spirit we saw during the high-speed train threat, the sense of volunteerism, our natural resources, and recreational venues are worth fighting for to retain, nurture, and grow. Planning and smart budgeting for these and our businesses, tourism draws, and invaluable nonprofits require qualified, responsible leadership capable of working effectively with residents, town officials, other municipalities, and other state and federal offices. I approach this debate in the same way I approach my responsibilities as Selectwoman. I show up. I listen. I do the research. I ask questions. I participate. I try to treat everyone with respect, and I work hard for us, all of us, every day. It has been a privilege to be your Selectwoman, and would be an honor to have another term to pursue the initiatives managed under First Selectwoman Bonnie Reemsnyder. I'm asking for your vote on November 5th for myself and my running mate, Bonnie, and we will continue to make Old Lyme our priority every day.
Thank you to our audience for coming out tonight, and those who may be watching after the fact to hear this debate. And thank you, Tim, for your past service and for showing up tonight. While this is not nearly enough time to answer all of your questions, I think it gives you a good sense of our commitment, energy, and approach to governing in Old Lyme. I especially want to acknowledge the advocate that we all have in Selectwoman Mary Jo Nosal. She is deeply engaged in the process, listening to all people's concerns and reporting back to the entire Board of Selectmen. She attends numerous board and commission meetings to stay on top of what's going on in all aspects of our town, and she never backs down on an issue. I know that she and the entire team on Row A will serve our town well. That is why I'm asking for your continued support and your vote for Row A all the way on November 5th. See you at the polls.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight. Hopefully that we achieved our objective, that you could hear from the candidates and have some of your questions answered. Thank you to Tim, Bonnie, and Mary Jo. Appreciate you, all the preparation and effort that you put into this tonight. Thank you very much, Beth, for the questions and leading us through this. And thank you to our timekeepers.